I'm Cole Krant,
I'm Joe Powers.
and we're going to be going over our best
And worst.
team stories. So I'm an officer in the hiking club. We incorporate about 1,400 members, and there are about 12 officers that manage all of them, and we have 3 executives that manage all of us. And so there was this one time on one of our trips, we were going to Maroon Bells. It's a backpacking trip across a weekend, so it's an overnight trip. And so we took a group of about 25 people, first night chilling. The next day's a little bit harder, and unfortunately, one of our members felt really sick and wasn't really able to continue on. And Steven came down the mountain, and he first came to me and was like, well, okay, Jacob had just gotten a radio from the slow group that said that she had actually decided that she doesn't want to go. She was feeling too sick. She felt it would be better if she camped the night and went back home. So Jacob sent Steven down to communicate with us because they knew that our walkie-talkie was down. And so he wrote a note giving the whole plan so that I could go back and communicate with Jacob what exactly happened after Steven went down to the slow group and obviously made sure everything was okay. And the next morning, they had camped the night just before the second peak. They went to the nearest trailhead, took her back to Boulder. All was well. Things were good. So now, if I were to reflect on this experience from a management perspective, using some of the things we learned, I would say that our group was homogenous in the sense that we all had the same goal. We wanted to make sure that each member got to the end destination, made it to camp, and had a good time. Prior to accepting people to the hike, we made sure to give a realistic depiction of how it was going to go to make sure that the people who came knew what was going to happen. They knew the responsibilities they would have to uphold to be part of the group, and they knew how difficult it was going to be. In Maroon Bells, we also tried to employ a relationship-oriented approach in the sense that we wanted to really bond with our team members and make sure that when we were going on the hike, each of us felt connected with one another and therefore safe. And that trust is pretty important, especially when you're out in the wild in nature, trying to survive and get across wherever you're going. When you take a group out, something that's really important as officers is to coordinate, and I would say that we had to have some serious teamwork going in order to make sure that we all got to the end destination safely and all had a good time and such. And I think that was reflected in our ability to communicate, especially between the slow, medium, and fast groups. As for the situation itself, it was definitely a non-programmed decision. These sort of things, it's hard to plan for, especially in emergency situations. We as officers have to be prepared for anything, but there's no way to know what's going to happen when you embark on a trip. So we had to consider all of the decisions in order to make sure that everyone was going to be okay. Like, she was going to be understanding, she wasn't going to feel left out or hurt, and she would come back for more hikes in the future. That was especially important to us too. We didn't want this one experience of, and not going so well just because she was a little underprepared to hurt her experience of hiking and therefore never go for it again.
So I'm going to tell an example of a bad story. One bad story I got is when I was in 1300, which is a class that all freshmen have to take. And that class can be very stressful because it's an introduction to coding. Nobody really understands what's going on. And my partner is an example of somebody who doesn't know what's going on. I found him pretty late because I didn't find one in time. And then when I started working with this partner, I had some problems because we started making the brainstorming and we made a project that probably would work, but it wasn't working with our final goal. I was trying to act as a leader, but it wasn't really working out a lot of the time. So we were going through that process, and in the end, we ended up having to scrap most of the work we had already done because it didn't fit in line with our end goal. So I was carrying throughout most of the project, and it was definitely not my best work group experience. Okay, so I want to talk about the bad story from a managerial perspective. The first problem we had was probably a lack of brainstorming the right way. I think our main problem was groupthink because when we were talking about the project, we would just say something and the other person would agree, and there wasn't a lot of critical thinking if that would go towards the end of our argument correctly. Another problem that we had was I tried to step up and be a transactional leader, and I did that by being results driven and reward driven, but my group wasn't putting in a lot of effort, and so it ended up just being a lot of negative feedback. Our main motivator on this project was extrinsic motivation. Basically, we just wanted to focus on the grade. We were making a pretty cool game, but even though we were doing that, we both just focused on the grade more than anything else. The last thing that was probably the biggest problem of all, honestly, was we never figured out how to work virtually. We never set up how to do that within the coding environment.
I'm Cole Krant.
I'm Joe Powers.
And this has been our analysis based on what we learned in our management class.
Thanks for watching.